Okay, so now I have a number 4 pattern and a number 3 pattern. And I'm going to take the pattern with the lines and the dots. I'm going to do a different one for each size. So on the larger one, I'm going to cut out the curved shape, and on the smaller one, I'm going to do the straight line. Okay. Now, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut on this curved one, right on that center line, or that dividing line. And I'm going to lay that back down on my silver. And I'm going to take my Sharpie, make sure that it's writing. I'm going to draw that line. Remember, we want the reverse pattern for the other earring, so I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to lay it there. And again, I'm going to draw that curved line. You could freehand this if it were a pendant, but we want our earrings to somewhat match. So there's that pattern. Now here are the number 3s. I'm going to actually do the same thing. I'm going to cut around the pattern. Now after you've sawed and filed out your earrings, this little paper pattern may not fit exactly, but you can get it close enough to give an idea of where to draw the line. Again, right up that center line, I'm going to cut. Now I'm going to take the pointed part because it's going to be easier to line up on the earring. Turn it over. Draw your second line. So now that we've got our pattern, our line, onto our pieces, what this line demarks is the center of where we want our smooth and our textured pattern. Now, on each side of that, we want our line to drill our holes. So I'm going to set this divider at 5 millimeters. Okay. And then I'm going to set it on with, I'm just going to eyeball this with that dark line right in between, and I'm just going to mark a little notch. Okay, and I'm just going to mark another one here. And do that on all 4 earrings. Now I am not going to mark where we're going to drill our drill holes. We have a little bit to do first. We are going to texture one side of each of these. Then we are going to lay out our round argentium wire. We're going to fuse 2 strips the same width to give us kind of a tunnel. And within that tunnel, that's where we're going to do our weave. So next we are going to texture. Now you could do this pattern without doing any texture whatsoever. That'd be totally fine. I'm going to put this steel block on top of this one because I don't want to accidentally miss and damage this one. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to texture. Okay, I've already done one here of the curved ones. And if you'll notice, I stopped where my score line was. I did not go all the way to the dark line. I wanted to leave approximately 2.5 millimeters on that side because we're going to lay our argentium wire down there to fuse it, and I wanted as solid a surface to fuse to as possible. Now I'm going to do the next one. When you're texturing, your piece is going to curl. What you're doing is, if you can picture a bowl of flour and shoving your fist into it and the flour displacing and making a concave area, that's exactly what's happening with the metal. You're displacing, you're condensing and displacing the metal. And so as it moves, it is creating a curl. Now that's okay because we're going to anneal it, soften it, and it will smooth back out. Then it will be soft for us to dome the way that we did before. But I wanted to point that out. Every time you texture or every time you hammer a blow to a piece of metal, you are displacing metal and moving it out of the way. And it has to have somewhere to go, so it will cause the metal to curl. Now, one way to keep that to a minimum is to just gently hold the metal down in opposite places. It won't prevent it completely, and that's okay, but it will help it. So be mindful of where the score mark is and begin to apply your texture. I'm going to texture my edges. That's up to you if you want to do that. I do like that look, so I am going to texture all the way out to the edge. I want to remind you that I am not gripping this tightly. I do not want to get added strain on my wrist and my elbow. It can cause carpal tunnel and it can cause tennis elbow. This is a heavy steel hammer. The weight of the head alone is good enough to apply enough pressure to displace that metal. So simply, I don't even grip it very tight. I let it just more or less kind of flop in my hand and let gravity be my guide. Now, when you're doing a textured pattern like this, you want to continue to go over it. If you can see individual little divot spots, that's not what we're after. We want just an overall overlapping pattern of texture. So continue to go over your piece until there's no distinct pattern. And now I have two textured earrings. So I'm going to do the other two and then we'll go on to the next step. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take our Argentium 16 gauge round wire and we're going to measure what we need. Now, the reason I didn't say exactly how much you need for each one is because I don't know which project you pick. I will give you an estimate, or I did give you an estimate, but what we need to do at this point is we need to lay our wire down on our line. And we don't want to make it exact. We want to give a little room for error. So I'm going to cut it a little bit longer. I'm going to take that piece, measure it, cut the second piece. Now, that is for that earring. It should be enough for this one as well, and it is. So I'm going to cut 4 pieces that length. Okay, those will be for that one. I'll do the same on this one. We need 4 pieces. Okay, now we have our pieces for that one. What we're going to do at this point is we're going to anneal all of our pieces. We're going to anneal our wires and we're going to anneal our earring backs. These we're going to curve before we ever lay them on there. We want to follow that curve and lay them on there. And then we're going to fuse them. Now, the reason that we want to anneal them is because if we bend them and we get the shape we want, and then we lay them on our piece to fuse them, as we're fusing them, as we're heating them, they're going to start to anneal before they fuse. And that could cause them to move. And it may misshape them, it may straighten them out. But we want them as annealed and as softened as possible, so that when we gently shape them and we get our shape, they may harden a slight bit, but we're going to be gentle with them. And then when we lay them back on, we've got two annealed pieces of metal, and it's our hope that they'll stay parallel and they will not move. So I'm going to go over now and I'm going to anneal all my pieces. Now, one thing I do want to say, when I anneal and apply heat, the Sharpie line will go away. So I have my metal laid out on my hard charcoal block. You want to make sure it's a hard charcoal block. The others will disintegrate too quickly because they're not hardened. They can't sustain the heat. Now for annealing, the heat won't be that high, but it will be when we fuse. I'm using my silver Smith torch. You can use your butane torch, but you do want a bushy flame, not a pointed one. Now I'm just going to turn this probably a quarter of a turn. I'm going to turn up my flame. And I'm going to point my flame down, but I'm not going to get too close. And I'm going to circle. I don't want that off. I'm going to circle all of it, just mostly to heat the charcoal block because it is cold. But this will also gently warm up the metal pieces. Then I'm going to begin to concentrate on one piece at a time. I'm moving in a circular motion. And what I'm looking for is the metal itself to come to a peach color. Now, that usually happens about the same time that the Sharpie disappears. You do not want to get argentium silver to a red hot. That is overheating it and it will damage the integrity of the metal. Now for the wires, they take much less heat, so I'm just going to go a few passes and do several at a time here. And now the metal is annealed. Now with argentium silver, you do not want to quench immediately. If you drop a ball on it and you see that it skitters the way it did like that, that is too hot. What we want to do is wait until it sizzles, just like that. Those are fine to quench. Now you don't want to keep dropping droplets on it repeatedly because that could be almost as bad as quenching it. But it just takes a few seconds and see, there you go, it's ready to quench. Just pick it up, dip it in the water, and you're good to go. Now I did not use any flux on these pieces. That's one of the beautiful things about Argentium silver, is that it does not develop fire stain or fire scale. Okay, it's all ready to go, and now we're going to take them back over there and we're going to shape our wires and get them ready to fuse. Be sure anytime you wash or wet your metal that you dry it thoroughly, because the water or the dampness will rust your tools. So be sure and dry them thoroughly. Now this is one that curved a little bit, so I'm just going to gently tap it down to flatten it again. This one as well. It was larger and there was more textured area. The smaller ones didn't seem to do that. So what we want to do is we want all 4 of our wires to curve at the same curvature. So I'm just going to take all 4 wires and I'm going to gently curve them using the pad of my thumb. Then after I've done just a little bit, I'm going to lay them on to see how they look on the piece. And I think for that one it looks very nice. Because I formed all 4 of them together, I know that these will match. Okay, those are ready to fuse. Okay, for these we want our wires to be straight, and actually, believe it or not, that's a little bit more challenging. So I'm just going to do the same thing, and I'm just going to straighten them with my fingers, all 4 of them. One thing you can do is you can roll it on the disc, but you have to be careful because that will work harden it. And we want to be careful that we don't undo the annealing that we've just done. And there you go, all ready to fuse. Okay, I'm going to use Rhonda Coriel's Purple Flux. You can get it from Rio Grande. You could also use Yellow Mighty Flux, but Rhonda specifically designed the Purple Flux for Argentium silver. I use little condiment cups frequently. They're disposable, they're cheap, and you could use a glass container if you wanted to. So I just put my pieces in the flux just to get them coated. I will lay the flat pieces out. Then I will take the wires and place them where I want them. The first one I'm going to place right up against the textured area. The next one I'm going to place 5 millimeters away from the other one. When you're designing pieces, look ahead for potential problems. If I left this here where I want to drill my ear wire or ear hole, that would be a problem. That would be a conflict. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply move this one down, and I'm going to move that one down enough that it will not inhibit the ear wire or the post. That's where we're going to drill the hole, and we're going to rivet the top piece in there. Now I'll want to mirror that on this one. Take your time, double check, make sure everything is exactly where you want it. Okay, that looks good to me. Now you can get your calipers if you want, just to double check your spacing, but I think we're good to go. So now I'm going to take my Smith torch again, just until I hear the gas. I'm going to light it. I'm going to turn it up until I have a flame that looks like that. If you turn it up to where it hisses, that's too high. I'm going to move the flame around the pieces. The flux is going to dry. First it's going to go white and puffy. Then once the fluffy white starts to go away, you'll notice it looks very dirty. Now I'm going to focus on one at a time now. You see the dirty flux? That is the second step. Keep the flame a good distance away. You want that bushy flame and you want it pointed straight down. Now I'm being very careful not to go way out on the edge, because if I get those little wires hotter quicker than the base of it, they will draw up and they will ball up, and we don't want to do that. So next you will notice that the dirty is starting to go away. It's starting to burn off, and the metal is starting to look glistening and silver. The next stage is you're going to see what looks like little tiny micro droplets. That's the flux balling up into little droplets. Almost looks like sweat. Then you're going to start to see them dance around, and the metal actually looks almost wet. And when it does have that wet texture, you have it at the fusing temperature. Be very careful and watch at this point, because you could melt your silver. So be very, very careful. Now what we're watching for is we want to make sure those wires fuse to the metal. Because we've been taking care of these ends out here, that's the first place that won't fuse. But now I think we're safe. We can go over there. We can fuse them. If you see any dark lines under the wires where they meet the silver, it isn't fused. Take your torch away for just a moment. Go back in. Bring it back up. Take your torch away again. Everything looks good. There's good white lines underneath, so that one is fused. So now I will move to the second one. Again, you're going to see the dirty flux. I'm focusing on the earring itself, not the wires. The wires will get hotter quicker, so I'm not worried about them. What I'm concerned about is getting the base of the earring hot. Okay, now the dirty flux is starting to burn away. Now you're seeing the little micro droplets. And they're going to start to dance across the surface. And then the metal's going to start to go glassy and wet looking. And that tells you you're at fusing temperature. Make sure all the wires at the ends are fused. Pull away for a moment. Go back in. Pull away. Go back in. Take a look. Is it a white line or a dark line where they meet? I've got good white lines. So I'm fused. Now remember that you can't quench argentium immediately. I have a saying, if it skitters, wait. There's no need to keep dropping constant water droplets on there. That is as bad as quenching it. So always just wait. If this were just a wire or two, it wouldn't take it very long at all to cool down. But we've got a bigger piece of metal, and so it's going to take it just a little bit to cool down. You'll notice how clean it looks. Still looks clean after fusing. That's one of the other beautiful things about argentium. It's still a little bit hot there. We will wait. Our lines look good. It's about there. I think this one's fine. I'm going to pick it up, let it air dry just a little bit, and then quench. I'll pick it up, quench it. Now it's time to put it in the pickle.